Okay, Nick, are you surprised Deshaun Watson hasn't bounced back?
No, he's not good anymore.
Period.
It's not coming back, and he knows it. He's not as escapable as he once was.
And Deshaun Watson doesn't look like that guy to me anymore, for whatever reason.
Deshaun Watson has seemed to have lost his magic or mojo.
No matter what you think of Baker Mayfield, they would have, objectively speaking, been better riding out Baker for another year.
I mean, they just don't have it. They don't know what they're doing. They panic. Bad money at worse money, it's what they do. They cannot get out of their own way.
You know that they're going to run that ball, and you know that they're going to establish that run and then use play action off of that run. So this is why I got the Titans outright, Nick.
Outright. Well done. I like that.
I'm going to go Titans here in the upset, 20-17.
I really don't have a lot of faith in the Browns offense without Nick Chubb. He's the heart and soul of that offense.
Agreed.
Vrabel is, in my opinion, one of the 6 best coaches in the sport. Stefanski's nowhere close to that.
Cleveland, maybe I have them low, but the defense is insane. You know they've only allowed 490 yards through 3 games? Deshaun Watson's not the same, but he can make plays.
I think the Browns are an interesting one. That Browns defense is clearly, one of the 5 best in football, and that might be undershooting it.
There was so much overreaction after the Pittsburgh game. Browns fans were bailing on Deshaun Watson, people were calling for Stefanski's head, people thought the season was over because of Chubb's knee injury, and what we just saw against the Titans was exactly what we expected. And this isn't going to be an overreaction saying that Deshaun Watson has arrived. This was simply a step in the right direction and more of what we expected when the Browns signed him to that huge contract that we can never stop hearing enough about. Overall, this was a very good game against a solid opponent, but of course the media is going to paint them as just an absolute doormat when that's far from the truth. A Mike Vrabel coach team is a good team. However, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves because in my preseason predictions, I had the Titans pretty low on the totem pole in the NFL. First and foremost, with Deshaun Watson, people saying that he's washed, that he's not his old self whatsoever, and that he'll never get back, you do not lose that. Watson, right out of the gate, was getting hit, there was pressure, and he withstood all of that, kept the play alive, and extended drives, and that was huge. That was the thing that I was most happy to see, especially on that first drive when he got pressured immediately, took the hit, spun out of it, rolled out, and found an outlet for the first down. That was huge, and that's exactly what we're looking for from Watson in those scenarios. If that was Baker Mayfield or any of most of the other starting quarterbacks who aren't athletic like that, that would have been a sack. There were plenty of plays in this game that would have been sacks with a lot of the quarterbacks, and absolutely would have if Baker Mayfield was still the quarterback. He played a lot better in terms of his anticipation as well, especially on that dig route to DPJ coming across the middle. He stood in the pocket, stayed calm with his feet, kept his eyes downfield, and really made a great throw into that open zone. He also continued to excel on all of those sideline shots, and he just really has a great ability to put touch on deep balls down the rail as well. So that was very encouraging to see. He also hit his open shots, which was something that we also always struggled to see Baker Mayfield do. And I'm bringing up Baker because this is still that same offense. It was always lacking those big, deep downfield shots, and I think that Watson's strength was those deep downfield shots when he was thrown to Will Fuller, DeAndre Hopkins in Houston. So now that he's getting comfortable, he can exploit those back-end breakdowns. And this is another thing that the critics are going to say, that the Titans secondary is horrible and that it was just pitch and catch on a lot of those plays that they made, which isn't true. It was really only 1 or 2 of those plays that were pitch and catch, the Jerome Ford touchdown and the Amari Cooper touchdown. But that's what big plays are. Big plays come from communication breakdowns, coverage breakdowns, and defensive secondaries. And good quarterbacks, or at least reliable, consistent ones, exploit them when they see them. They don't panic. They don't have severe underthrows or severe overthrows. Sure, I'm sure Deshaun Watson's looking at that ball and say, wow, it would be nice if Amari Cooper didn't have to slow down whatsoever, but it doesn't matter. A touchdown is a touchdown, and he had active eyes downfield to complete those plays and really just solidify the win overall. So, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, Watson has absolutely improved. This was a big step forward for him, but there's still room to grow, and he will. I think one thing I would really like to see is to see us start to exploit the middle of the field more. A lot of these plays right now are down the sidelines, and that's likely because if you miss there with a quarterback who isn't totally comfortable yet, usually worst case scenario, it's out of bounds. You're not throwing into coverage where it can get tipped, the safety can pick it off, or a linebacker. So that's something that we would like to see, and I think we will get there. It's just a matter of time of working through those kinks. It's just really crazy to me how so many people wrote Watson off this fast and how the media narrative has shifted. And the reality is that multiple teams wanted this guy. Multiple teams were willing to give up a lot of money and picks to get Deshaun Watson as their quarterback. We know Atlanta was one of those top teams in there, Carolina, and now that he's a Brown, it has completely changed, that he's a scumbag and this and that. And again, we're not going to get into all of the past of all of those things. I am not a judge. I am not a juror. I'm looking at this as purely a football player scenario, but we are seeing the return to that form, and everyone who was saying all of that stuff about how this is the worst trade in NFL history, about how he is not the same player and how he won't return there, what are they saying now? It'll be really interesting to see as this continues to develop, but I assume that they're going to hold off on revisiting this topic until after the Baltimore game, because that Baltimore game is going to be a struggle, and I'm going to touch on that at the end. But let's move on to the defense now. The fact that this defense was as bad as it was for so long under Joe Woods is so mind-blowing. And I know we've added a lot more help in terms of the interior defensive line, but we still had pieces, man. We still had guys who could go out and play. And what Jim Schwartz is doing and bringing the best out of these guys and bringing an energy and an identity is so exciting to see. I've never actually been excited to see the Browns defense on the field before, but I genuinely am now. Myles Garrett finally doesn't have to carry the team completely. The push that these defensive tackles get off of the line is so violent and upfield. JOK can finally navigate and stop the run because he's not having guards and centers working up to the second level and blowing them up. And remember, we didn't even have Greg Newsome in this game. Not that we really needed to, because the Titans' pass attack is pretty anemic in general, but just as a collective, they're working together so well, they're playing with so much passion, and it's so great to see. But as the season goes on, offenses get better around the league, things start to click more, so it's not always going to be this 3-point per game thing where they're not letting any touchdowns and just a handful of first downs. This defense is going to be tested. That San Francisco game is going to be a major test for them in terms of all the weapons that they have and more mobile quarterbacks with Lamar Jackson and Brock Purdy. So when those things start to happen, keep in mind, the sky isn't falling. It's just what football is. It's a test. It's a back and forth, and it takes a lot to build the character, and you can't build the character unless you have something to respond to. So when those tests come, when they give up first downs, when they give up touchdowns, those are a good thing in the grand scheme of the season. One thing I would like to see from the defense is for them to be more opportunistic in terms of turnovers. We had that strip sack on Tannehill, and it kind of looked like we just let that ball bounce around, sitting on the field, rather than being aggressive, scooping and scoring, or just diving on it and securing the turnover. I'm sure that that's a play that Schwartz will be talking about in meetings this week, saying, hey, ball's on the ground, we got to play to the whistle. Don't stand around and wait to see what's happening or if the play's still alive. Go out there and make something happen. They're very close in a lot of these moments, but as they start to play better offenses, they're going to have to capitalize. They're going to have to intercept the ball when it hits their hands. When they strip sack the quarterback, they have to recover these balls, because those can be what make or break a game. Now let's talk about that out of bounds with Amari Cooper. That was one of the worst calls I've ever seen. In terms of the context, it wasn't too bad because they ultimately won the game. It didn't cause a loss. It's obviously horrible. However, I do not think that these things are intentional. Every fan base could pick a handful of moments and say, the ref screwed us here, it was intentional, they're rigging games, they're trying to fix it, the world and the cards are stacked against us. I don't think that. I'm not trying to attract that mindset towards the team or the fan base or whatever. It was just an absolutely awful call with no excuse whatsoever. These refs need to be full-time employees. They need to be held responsible and fined for their blown calls. And then these things will start to happen less and less and less. I don't know what this guy was thinking, but it was bad, plain and simple. And This is something that we need to point out as well. If we're going to point out bad calls against the Browns, which have happened, which absolutely have happened, and I'm not denying that this was an egregious one, we also need to point out the fact that this defensive line, and specifically Myles Garrett, were lining up in the neutral zone all game, and it did not get called once. And that was to our benefit all day. Tannehill had absolutely no time to do anything all day. Let's keep these things in mind. If we're going to talk about how badly we're getting screwed, which that was an awful call, I'm not denying that whatsoever, we also need to acknowledge that the cards aren't completely stacked against us. We did get calls or no calls in this scenario, and that helped us. This is the point of these videos for me. I've seen negativity and doom and gloom Browns fans my whole life, been going through the losing seasons the same as everyone else. The people who watch these videos, I want this to be the optimistic Browns fan club. I don't want us to just revert to negativity whenever anything bad happens, because that's just football. It's ups and downs. It's how you respond. It's a 60-minute fight. That's why comebacks are great. That's why underdog stories are great. Disasters happen, great teams respond, and that is not just in a single game scenario. That's throughout an entire season. So let's be optimistic Browns fans. Let's not just regress into all of the sins of our fathers. And maybe we need some optimistic Browns fans merch coming out soon, so keep an eye out for that. So going forward, I think this offensive identity is seriously changing. We saw Watson lined up in empty and shotgun, and it was working. It really helps him distribute the ball. I think it helps him see the field better. And this is no longer a run-first team. This is a running back by committee team. Kareem Hunt came back in, and he looks solid, man. So it'll be exciting to see how he shakes out in the screen game, in the zone run scheme. Jerome Ford continued to look solid. He just has a lot more speed to be able to capture the edge. And he's solid in the pass game as well, 2 weeks in a row. And even Pierre Strong looked pretty solid as well. I think that's more of what we're going to see. We're going to see more of a modern NFL type offense that's predicated on the pass game, but leans on the run game in certain scenarios by cycling in fresh backs. We're not going to have a 25 carry per game back anymore. That's just not the way this team is built. This Ravens game is going to be a serious test. Anyone watching this video, this is a PSA to anyone watching this video, you cannot revert to the negativity. You cannot revert to doom and gloom. That's not how it's going to work. That is not what is going through the minds of these players. This team was never going to be an undefeated team. They're going to lose some games. They could lose this Baltimore game. I'm not making a pick one way or the other, but it could happen. And if it does, you need to relax. It's a learning scenario. They're going to play them again. They'd be 2-2 if that was the case. They would still be fine. And not that this is going to be a 500 team. I still think that this is a 12-5 team, even after the Chubb injury, but you're going to drop some games along the way, and you're going to learn more about yourself and learn how to adjust. Watson is not completely back. Just because he had a good game doesn't mean that he's going to be passing for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns every game. That's not the way it's going to be. He still has bumps and bruises. He still has a rocky road ahead of him. He still needs about 10 games to get fully comfortable and immersed and in command of this offense. So don't be tweeting about how the Browns are back and how we've completely figured it out, or that the season's over in case we have some bad drives or we lose this game on Sunday. It's not the way it works. It's a long season. And this Ravens team is real. It's going to be the best offense that they've faced so far, excluding the Bengals game because the rain and whatnot. But this is going to be a tough test. I think they have the D-line to be able to bottle up Lamar Jackson, but it's still Lamar Jackson. The dude was an MVP. He's a great player. Zay Flowers, great player. Different type of receiver than the secondary has seen all year so far. And this Ravens defense is good. So that's going to be a solid test. It will be funny if they do win, though, because we already know the media will say, look at all the injuries the Ravens have had, whatnot, so on and so forth. But we'll leave that for next week's recap. Overall, to just put a bow on this week and the performance of this team, Myles Garrett is an absolute dog. He showed up. The respect that he commands with 2 tight ends following him around the formation, causing the Titans to call a timeout, coming up when it matters most right before halftime on that sack. That is who that dude is. He is a man amongst boys. He is a difference maker, and he's making his team so much better. And I think that's the story of this week. After an emotional loss, the way that they came out and played as a defense, the way that Kevin Stefanski responded to Deshaun Watson's touchdown pass to Amari Cooper, we've never seen him show this much emotion. You can see the stress leaving his body in those moments where he's saying, okay, we're starting to see the glimpse of who he can be and where he can return to. And as Browns fans, you just have to understand that they're not moving with your ebbs and flows. They're not moving with your snap reactions to a bad drive or a dropped pass or a lost game. They are focused on the long run, and that's why I personally believe in this team, why I think that they will go 12-5, why they will be a playoff team, because they're focused on each week as a new week. They're not dwelling on everything and just convinced that they are doomed to failure. It's not the way it works. Everyone who made comments about Watson being completely washed, I hope that this week cleansed your palate a little bit. And everyone who's exclaiming that he is the returned MVP for him, just understand, temper your expectations. There's still a lot of work to do. So thank you guys so much for watching. It was a great game, really excited. I'm so thankful for everyone who's been watching and supporting. And I just hope that you can share with your friends and family, that we can keep this thing growing. Please subscribe, and guys, please follow me on Twitter, otherwise known as X now. I will link that down below. If you guys are interested in any other form of content, in a long form podcast, let me know in the comments, please, because if that's what the people want, I'm gonna come out here and give it to you. Okay, thank you so much. We will see you in the next one. Talk to you later.
If we took the holiday, took some time to celebrate.